Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show's been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com.
When I was working construction, and one day I went into work, I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. I was 21 years old, and I just gave my tools away to one of the apprentices and went home. Stopped off at the school on the way to get an application to go to college there, because I decided I was going to do book covers for a living. I didn't even know what the odds were.
Joined by Kevin Murphy. Kevin is the founder of Evolve Artist. He is a master illustrator, portrait artist and art educator with over 30 years of experience, and I'm fascinated by his journey. Self-taught, focused, regimental in his approach to strategy and technical mastery. And we're going to get into what's wrong with the current model of art education, and Kevin's story tells us something entirely different. In his career, he's worked for the likes of National Geographic and the Rolling Stones, creating all kinds of beautiful work with LucasArts, Barnes & Noble, Sega, and much more. This is a great one. This is fascinating work. We're going to get into it with Kevin Murphy. This is The Creative Condition. How are you doing, guys? Welcome back to the show. I am Ben Talon, host of the Creative Condition podcast, founder of the Creative Condition, artist, writer, creativity coach, and illustrator. That's the big one, isn't it? I've been doing that 18 years. Forget that little title. Introductions are tricky when you're juggling a few roles. How are you doing? I hope you're well. Welcome back to the show. If you're a regular listener, if you've been here before, if you're new, hello. Lovely to have you. How did you find the show? Let me know. Get in touch. Ben at bentalon.com. Always happy to hear from the listeners. I hope life is treating you well. I hope you're calm. I hope you're feeling creative. I hope that you're feeling optimistic despite the things we're exposed to in a world that was always turbulent, continues to be turbulent. It's just that we are so bombarded and exposed to it these days that our heads are spinning, aren't they? How have you guys been feeling? I've been feeling okay. I've had my ups and downs as ever. I'm still continuing to do the work on battling what I believe is a general anxiety disorder. Whatever it is, I've been suffering a lot of anxiety and sometimes, ambushed by it and almost irrational to what's going on around me, which is, I believe, symptomatic of that. I've also become aware recently of the term andropause, which is not to undermine the severity and the implications and the weight of the menopause, but there's increasing amounts of research that show hormonal changes among men too, and I don't know if it's playing a part in what I've had, but I'm going with full-blown midlife crisis, because that's, my situation has been symptomatic of major thoughts around mortality, around the climate, around the things that ultimately I have very little to no control over, yet haunt me at night, in the mornings, and a lot of the times in the day as I'm walking around, and my thoughts are like an untrained puppy, in a room full of toys. I've had a reasonably comfortable ride in my life. Like, we didn't grow up with much in terms of money, but we had a lot of love. I had a lot of psychological safety in the home. So I grew up in a nice, peaceful childhood with a lot of joy, a lot of creativity, a lot of encouragement to follow my heart and find out who I was. What I think that has led me to is this point in life when I'm really starting to have this midlife crisis, or andropause, or whatever you want to call it, where my brain feels like it's about to explode a lot of the time. The information I'm taking in each day, the sheer amount of that, the weight and the severity of that, then with an overthinking brain that is already tired from parenthood, which I find joyous but also exhausting. and starting to, build a coaching practice, run a podcast, continue my career as an illustrator, to write books. I do a lot in my life, and I think that there's something of a burnout fatigue aspect going on too. Anyway, I made a promise to be very vulnerable and honest with you guys and just share my feelings. I want to facilitate more conversations around that because it's been so helpful for me to check in with the people in my life who are willing to hear and to help and to share their experiences, and it's created such deeper bonds in friendships than we're already there with, already very close, the closest friend in my life. And I think that you can't help but strengthen that bond when you talk about the very real things. But that's what I want to do on this show. I want to facilitate conversations around mental health, around spirituality, around just the human condition and what we're going through in the world collectively together. But of course, always through the lens of creativity. And that's why I'm talking to Kevin Murphy today, because Kevin is a master illustrator, portrait painter, and founder of Evolve Artist, which is a wonderful teaching program, which is all based around mastery of skill, understanding of the craft. Kevin's going to get into why that's important, why it's lacking from traditional education, and why traditional education often fails people who want to be artists and want to build their talent in that area. He says that talent doesn't exist. That's something we're going to get into. Why talent is a lie and what actually builds great artists. The right and wrong in art. Why clarity creates confidence, about forgetting art school and the simple process that is taught through Evolve. So it's an interesting one. I would love your feedback on this and what you make of it. I found Kevin to be a very interesting guest. His story is interesting. Go and watch a YouTube video about Kevin if you want, about his background, because it's amazing about how he went from having no ability to teaching himself in the space of a year to be a master illustrator and getting work with the likes of the Rolling Stones and LucasArts and all sorts of stuff. And it's really, really amazing. I mean, when you look at the work, it's there. The proof is there. And the proof, it would seem, is in the results of the students that are taught through the Evolve Artist program. So that's what we're getting into today. If you want to further your own practice and you would like to work with me as a coach, that is something I am very big on doing at the moment. I have a pit stop session, which is an intensive one-to-one audit of your creativity. We go through where you are, where you've been, your origin story, where you like to go, your hopes, fears and dreams. We break it all down through my Anatomy of Creativity map, which leaves no stone unturned, from your environment to your humour, to your hormones, to your personality, to the body and the brain. Are you looking after yourself? How do you eat? How do you rest? How do you idle? All of these things that make up for functional, optimistic creativity. I did a session last week on Friday. It was wonderful. I've just had some beautiful glowing feedback this morning from the client. I really love it. It's kind of life affirming for me. Someone who cares and wants to help people shine. I also have a lower priced session, 90-minute one-off session. Get in touch about that. I'm trying to make this accessible for everyone because I realise that I've had a number of queries around the pit stop. And the price, which it has to be for the intensity of the work I'm required to give for it, it puts some people off because we're all living in, an economic crisis of sorts, a cost of living crisis, and it makes it hard. So I wanted to bring in a lower, basic but still very effective session that I can help people with. There's also an illustrator-specific session, and I'm developing a workshop at the moment too. And I also have my brand new storytelling coaching module. 4 sessions. We will tell your life story. We will write your life story. It's called The Internal. It's a distilled version of the biography process that I call The External, where I will help you to coach you to write your book, or I will write your book for you if that's the way you want to go, through a series of candid interviews to tell your story. But The Internal is about using it as a compass for you to establish your values, your principles. You own your lived experience to enable you to become the author of your life moving forward, because I just see so much chaos and firefighting among founders and CEOs and creative directors that I want to help them with this coaching model to tell their story. So if any of those are of interest, head to thecreativecondition.com where you'll see the appropriate links. There is a book coaching link. There is a coaching link. You can read all the information, fill out the form, or drop me an email, ben@bentalon.com, and we'll have a chat. We'll have a no-obligation Zoom call to see where you're at, to see if it's a good fit, because I have to check from my end too. So I don't want to let anyone down if they're expecting something different. There are many great coaches out there, plenty of which can offer what I cannot, but none who can offer what I do. So get in touch. Right, without further ado, big thank you, of course, to the founding sponsor of this show, which it wouldn't be possible without, Illustration X. They're an awesome agency based in London, worldwide, New York, Shanghai, Australia. They're all over the place. They're in France. They do such good work. Check out their global range of illustrator and animator portfolios now at illustrationx.com. And a massive thank you to the Ukrainian Institute, who continues to be a part of this show and I want to support, because they are supporting the brave and embattled Ukrainian creative community in a time of war. check them out, ui.org.ua, and support their artists. Now, it could be as little as a share on social media. It could also be a commission if you're in a position to do that. And also, if you get a chance, check out Radim Malinich's Daring Creativity platform, which is beautiful. You might know Radim's, Daring Forever platform, because you'll know Radim's podcast, Daring Creativity. One of my coaching clients, Ryan Lewis, is on this week's episode, so do check that out. Ryan has had quite the journey, and it's been a joy to help him with that. So take a look there also. Let me know what's going on, ben@bentalon.com, or message me on LinkedIn. Best ways to get me. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with the amazing Kevin Murphy.
I'm not doing a lot of creative stuff these days as far as like creating art. But when I had a studio in my home forever, and I'd get up in the middle of the night. Like I'd be painting till say midnight. I'd go to sleep. 2:00, I'd wake up. I just realized something. I'd go back in the studio and okay, now I can sleep. And I lay down, and 4:30. I forgot about something. There was a color, and it's like, my wife was like, "You need to like stop doing this. You're killing me. Like I have to go to work in the morning." And and it was like, your brain is solving problems when you go to sleep. It's fixing your body, and it's sifting through everything that you did during the day. And so you wind up in a place where it's like, yeah. And I think if you're conscientious, most people aren't, but if you're conscientious, it gets you up, because you can't stand to leave something undone. Maybe in the morning you won't remember, but like I know it now, and I'm not going to be able to sleep knowing that thing wasn't done the way I wanted it to, or this idea that I just had, that I don't scribble it down, And I think like it's an artist thing. It's an artist thing. I always got to.
It is. I researched. When I was writing my second book, The Creative Condition, I wanted to write a chapter on the unconscious, and there's a really high number of Nobel Prize winners that their ideas either came to them in dreams, upon waking, or right before going to sleep for that exact reason.
Yeah. Well, they don't know why dreams happen. They've not been able to figure out, but they have ideas. They believe that dreams are where our brain is solving problems for us. And most of us, it's solving the problem of being chased by a werewolf, but it's like, being chased by a wild animal. And in your dream, it's a werewolf, but it could be a dog. It could be anything. And your brain is trying to make sense of all the potential scenarios that you might run into in your life that could be threatening. And of course, there's some nice stuff in there as well. But it's like your brain is problem solving, based on all of the information you put into it. And many, many people solve their problems in their sleep. They wake up with the ideas. And it is their idea. It comes from all of the data that they've been dumping into their brain in the way they've been dumping it in, and their brain just sifting through it and connecting it to what they did yesterday and a week ago and a month ago. And it's it's we're just starting to figure out. The program that I have is built around cognitive science, and so I'm very curious about that stuff. I like to keep. And again, I don't get into too much of it. I don't get too deep into it. You don't have to in order to, it's a rabbit hole. You don't have to get too deep into it to be able to make sense of the pieces you need. Like I use Photoshop. Photoshop is a dense piece of software. I only need about 1% of it.
Yep.
And so I don't know the other 99%. I could figure it out if I had to, a little here and a little bit there. But for me to do what I need, I only need about 1%, a couple of tools and understanding how to manipulate them. And that's it. And I think like I'm the same with cognitive science. For what we do in making art, it's just a matter of how the brain processes visual stimulation, what it's looking for, because we're trying to trick that system when we create art. And so, and so it's like, for me, like, even though the program is built around at least the degree to which we understand the way the brain works, right? Because it's that information is growing every day. I only need to scratch the surface of it to be able to build my program,
Absolutely. Well, let's start there if you don't mind. I want to go right back because you've got a really interesting story. But I'd love just to let the listeners in. Tell us a little about Evolve to start with, if you'd be okay with that. Yeah.
So Evolve is an online art education that it's not like any other education. And it's the idea is that what I've found, I've been a professional for 34 years. I started out as a commercial illustrator. I didn't go to school for this. I basically learned it on my own. I taught myself to the degree that anyone can. You go to a museum, you see art. It informs you. You might not understand how something is done, but it raises the bar of expectation, what can be done. And over the years, anytime that I've needed to learn something and I couldn't figure out how to do it, miraculously somebody who had the information was willing to share it with me. I'd run into them and they would share it with me. And so, I've gotten to a place. The first 10 years of my career, I was a commercial illustrator. I've got about 300 to 350 published works, mostly book covers. But I did work for National Geographic, and I did some packaging work with Star Wars and Jurassic Park, MTV, Viacom, and I even did a cover for the Rolling Stones back in the late 90s. That's really my claim to fame. 300 plus illustrations, but that makes me a professional. Like, that makes me like somebody. And so I got out of that, and I opened up a publishing company. And it's just, I was working in that industry, and I had a couple of friends, and we were like, we could do this. We know everybody. Why don't we do that? And so we opened up a publishing company. We were around for about 10 years. We finally got run out of business by distributors. But we did about 150 titles, including the limited edition of Game of Thrones. So I got to work on Game of Thrones with George R. R. Martin for about 7 years, which was a lot of fun. And then in that time, I was also doing portrait work. So I've been a portrait painter for over 20 years. And I did this whole stay-at-home dad thing. We were talking about, you got 2 young kids, but I did the whole stay-at-home dad thing because my portrait work allowed me. I had a studio in my house. My wife at the time could go to work every day, and I would stay home with the kids. And then she'd get home, we'd eat dinner, and then I'd go to work. I'd work on the weekends. I did portrait work. I tailored back on my schedule. And when my oldest daughter was 5 years old, I decided, I need to get serious about getting back to work. And I just thought about it. I was like, I didn't want to be out of town as much as doing portrait work would have kept me out of town. I would have been out of town almost every weekend out of the year. And that wasn't okay for me. After being with my kids, 7 days a week for 5 years, not okay for me. And so I'd always wanted to open up a school. And so that's what I did. And I wanted to open up the school because for me, and for so many people, I would say the overwhelming majority of people that want to get into the arts, there's really no access to an education that's guaranteed, right? And it's as close to guaranteed as you can get. I didn't have access to an education. I had to figure it out for myself. And there's nothing worse than having to reinvent the wheel when you're doing it. The benefit of doing it is that, I understand how art is created at a microscopic level. There's no aspect of art creation, at least from the standpoint of creating a 2-dimensional image, that I don't understand. And I can manipulate the materials at a molecular level. And when I teach it that way, right? So a good way to equate that is, if you, let's say you grill steak, there's a way of doing it. And the way of doing it is not based on the cut of meat, but how fire interacts with the structure of the protein. And if you understand how that works, you will never do anything but make incredible steaks. It's one piece of information. People are pushing it and testing it, but it's a scientific thing. If the temperature is too high, the meat will be dry because it constricts the fibers and pushes out all the juice. If it's too low, the connective tissue doesn't break down, so it's chewy. There's a window in there. And it's like, if you understand anything at that level, in that way, you gain mastery over it. And it doesn't look like the skill set that most people think. There's a great guy. He's on cooking channel. His name is Alton Brown. Science of cooking. And if you pay attention to what it is, it's all science. Art is the same thing. It's physics, and it's cognitive science, right? Physics is the physics of light. All we see when we open our eyes is light. And I know I'm kind of all over the map here, but I'll kind of go back to your original question. But evolve came from my interest in disseminating the information as widely to the world as I could. So I opened up a school, just locally. I live just north of Princeton in New Jersey. I opened up a school locally here, and that school quickly got recognition. We have students producing, within a couple of years, we had students high school students producing professional level work. And it was consistent, one student after another, students winning international awards and all kinds of stuff like that. And eventually I expanded, I opened a second school and then built Evolve online. I was actually building it out as a franchise model. And the idea was that I wanted to make it accessible to as many people as were looking for it. You know, in a field that most people think of as starvation, you know, artists and starvation go together. The art world has been extremely kind to me. It's allowed me to build a life I didn't even know existed growing up. And so for me, finding a way to give back to other people who were in my position that wanted to be artists but didn't seem to be able to clear that hurdle, it was very important. It's really a mission for me. And so I put together this education and I've been refining it over the last 16 years. It's been refined. I mean, I don't sleep anymore. All I do is work on the program. And so I had built it out to be a franchise model. And then I was approached by a gentleman about bringing the program online. And so I did that first. And then from there, then we built out the franchise model. So we've got schools. We have most of the schools are in the US, but we have one in Australia and one in Malaysia. We'll be building out some schools in Europe probably in 27, you know, and it's just the Evolve program is global. And so now what we do is the people who are doing Evolve, once they know what they're doing and they understand enough to be able to open a school, we give them that option. Not everybody. They've got to be people that we believe will be successful in disseminating the information to the people in their area. And the whole goal of it is there are so many people in the world who would love to be able to make art, whether they want to do it professionally or just for their own, you know, pleasure. And it's almost impossible to find a good education because most educations, they start with the assumption that if you're already making art, that you know what you're doing, and then we're just going to layer on more and more complex things on top of it. And it really doesn't work that way. What I've found in my experience, like I said, I've been doing this a long time, almost 100% of the people that I interact with that are struggling, either they don't really get the results they want, or they're inconsistent, they struggle, but they get the result they want. The problem is not a lack of advanced ideas. They have gaps in their fundamental understanding, and the fundamentals support everything. Everything outside of the fundamentals is just nuance, but the fundamentals support everything. And it's very, very hard. I could tell you that to the best of my knowledge, there's only one other program in the world that actually tackles fundamentals. And I've looked, I know the pros, I can know the successful schools. What most people think of as fundamentals are not fundamentals, right? A fundamental is the smallest part, right? So if you talk about like a fundamental in an atelier is like drawing the human figure. Well, there are tons of smaller pieces that go into doing that. So the drawing of the figure is not fundamental. The pieces that make up the skill set that allow you to draw the figure is what's fundamental. And it might even be, there might be 3 layers below that to get to the thing that is really at the bottom that all those other skills are built on top of. If you don't have that ground floor, bedrock under your feet as you start building, there's a hard ceiling to your growth. And so basically our program is one that deals with that ground floor entry point. And the fundamentals, you can produce professional level work with nothing but fundamental application. We do it all the time here, all the time. And it's crazy to think, again, coming from where I come from, having worked for so many years in all these different fields, to realize that like I had a career as an illustrator and a career as a portrait painter, and I actually didn't know how anything worked. I figured it out later when I started teaching.
And yet you've been incredibly successful with that, you know. And I saw a video about a talk you gave actually, which was fascinating about your story. I'd love to just jump back a little bit. What did childhood look like? You mentioned that there was no art education. Did you show, you know, what was the earliest age you showed tendencies towards enjoying and being interested in art?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Bronx, violent area, very poor. And so there's not many resources. And my parents insisted that me and my brothers, that we be active. We couldn't just hang around because that's how you get in trouble in a neighborhood like that. And so I played sports, but I wasn't really that interested in the sports that were available, things like baseball and football. And so like I liked drawing, but I wasn't good. Amongst my friends, I was amongst my group of maybe five best friends, I was the fourth best artist. I wasn't much of anything back then. I didn't really draw. I didn't draw. I didn't paint. I didn't have materials. I grew up poor, so we couldn't afford like real materials. And at one point, my parents just decided I didn't want to play baseball or anything, little league. So they put me into an art class. And the teacher there said, "Oh, this kid is really talented, and you should make sure these stays in art." Now, like I look back at that work, and I don't know what he was talking about. Um, like I was focused, and I didn't rush through the work, and maybe that's all he saw, that I was patient in front of the easel. But that was about it. I was about 10 years old. And there's a little bit of bumping around along the way, seeing things that I thought were inspiring and then trying to copy them and not being good at it, walking away from art for a few years and then coming back again. And it's like I kind of did that my entire childhood from about 10 years old up until I graduated high school. Like I've run into people from high school, through Facebook and things like that. And when they find out that I'm a professional artist, they're like, "Did you do art when you were in high school?" But they have no idea. And then, because I didn't, I really didn't do any of this stuff. I got out of high school and I got into construction because that's pretty much where I was. I did construction for 3 years. I fell in love with I was reading science fiction books and I fell in love with the covers. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do for a living. And that was it. That set me on my path. And I'm a hard worker. I didn't know how to paint, but I work hard. And so the career that I built, both as a commercial illustrator and as a portrait painter, was built entirely on tenacity and then the experience of, because I didn't give up when I struggled. I just painted and painted and painted. And like, but I didn't have much in the way of guidance. I did get lucky. I mean, I ran into some people that were willing to share information with me and help me grow. And there's a lot of camaraderie in these industries, like not so much in fine art, but in illustration. I've found that the community of illustrators, if you're in a group, they're all very supportive and they share information. And no, people aren't guarding what they do. It's a little different in fine art, I think, but in commercial illustration, I've always found that the people who work in that industry are always very giving. They want to see the people around them succeed. They cheer for your successes, even if they're struggling. And so I got very lucky. I got into a field that people were like that, and they were open to sharing ideas with me. And again, like Evolve is just my way of giving that back.
Something you said there really pricked my ears, and it was the role of luck. And I have a term I call invisible hands, and I took that from Joseph Campbell when he talks about doors opening and a path opening up that you maybe didn't even know was there, but it feels right. I see this time and time again. I've been an illustrator for 18 years as we speak. And as I now evolve my career into coaching and this broader exploration of creativity, one of the crucial facets that I constantly have to remind myself to trust is that invisible hands. It's the willingness to do the work, to project that outwards with passion, and to trust that doors will open even when it seems completely unlikely. And I have never seen anything to the contrary. It happens. The most serendipitous moments happen. People appear in where I move to, or on a train, for example. It's when your eyes are alert and you're looking around. Is that something
Yes.
that's happened quite a bit for you?
It's funny. I'll tell a quick story in a moment, but early on in my career, like my luck, if you gave me the winning lottery numbers and I was across the street from a place that I could buy the ticket, I'd probably get hit by a car on my way crossing the street, or the place would get struck by lightning. My luck doesn't run that way. I don't win at bingo, but I always tend to meet the people that I need to meet. My life has always been like that. And part of it is that I'm open to people. I talk to people. I'm interested in conversations. And so you never really know who you're talking to. And and so early in my career, it was me that was in need of other people. And at some point that turned around and I realized that I was constantly meeting the people that needed to meet me. And I liked that. I liked being able to be that person. The person that I needed when I was younger, I now get to be that guy. And again, this art education comes from that thinking. But so I kind of tell you how I actually got into a career, because it's an interesting story. So this painting is not mine. It's a friend of mine. His name is Dorian Vallejo. So his father, Boris, very, very famous illustrator, world renowned. He's like the Norman Rockwell of science fiction. The guy's just amazing, him and Frazetta. But anyway, so when I was around 21 years old, I was working construction, and I couldn't seem to. I was painting a little bit because I wanted to do book covers, and I couldn't figure out how to get my work where I wanted it to be. I knew it just wasn't good enough, and so I wrote a letter to Boris, and these days it would be called stalking, but I figured out where he worked out. He weightlifted, and I dropped off a portfolio with a letter asking him if he wouldn't mind looking over my work and giving me some advice. He was really great. And like anybody who knows Boris, who has any heard stories, extremely generous with his time and energy. And this is a guy who doesn't have to be very busy. But he wrote a letter back to me saying, hey, if you want to do this as a hobby, that's great. But if you want to do this professionally, you need to get an education. And on the letter, there was a P.O. box, right? So I spoke with Boris. I got that letter back. So I went to university for one semester, and I realized it really wasn't the right fit. I was paying it out of my own pocket because I had money from construction. And, when you're paying it out of your own pocket, you want what you're paying for, right? You feel different about it. And so I realized immediately that I was not going to get what I was there for. And so I got out of there, and I saw that Boris's son, Dorian, had started to build quite a career for himself. And he's only about a year older than me, but he was already doing book covers and just incredible work. And so I sent a letter to Dorian to that post office box, right? So had Boris not responded to me, I would have had no way to reach Dorian. But that kindness, he sent me that letter. Now I had a way to reach his son, Dorian. So I sent Dorian a letter and asked if I could come watch him work. I'm figuring he's only like my age. Chances are like he might say yes. And of course, yeah, I get a phone call from him like 3 days later saying, why don't you come out and, you can do a photo shoot here and I'll show you a few things. Very nice, right? So I go out, we do a photo shoot. I got to do a self-portrait. And, but just going out and seeing the work and kind of getting a sense of what was possible changed everything for me. Within a year, I was a working professional. I went from nothing. I was at absolute zero when I showed up at Dorian's house that first day. And 12 months later, I had my first commission with a major publishing company. Fast forward, 8 years ago, I get a call from Dorian. Hey, Kevin, I don't like know your website. And this is a good friend of mine. I don't have your website information or anything. And I'm doing a podcast with a guy, and he's looking for people who teach. I wanted to give him your information. Can I just connect you guys here? And I was like, yeah, sure. That guy is Mitch Bowler. He's the guy who built Evolve. So Boris got back to me, right? You see, like kind of connecting them. Had I not reached out to Boris, there would have been nothing. Because I reached out to Boris and he got back to me, I had a way to reach his son who made it possible. He basically opened up the door for me to make a living at this. And then later on, 20 years later, puts me in touch with the guy who built Evolve. Now, I did the educational end of it, but he built the structure that Evolve is taught in. And in fact, I did a podcast. My business partner's name is Mitch. He's over in Barcelona, but he in the podcast, he asked me about teaching this online, and I said it was not possible. I've been called out on that a few times over the years. What happened? What was there money involved? And it's like, actually, I couldn't envision a way for it to be done. Mitch is a systems guy, and it took him months to figure out how to deliver the education in a way that felt like a classroom. I couldn't have done it. I didn't have the vision for it, but he did. He built an incredible system for it so that the students, even though they're doing it in their own living room, their kitchen, their own little studio, they're part of a community like you would be in an actual school. You're connected to the instructors. You're connected to your peers. And like I said, I could never have envisioned it. But like you talk about these little connections, those invisible hands, I would never have met Mitch otherwise. He didn't know who I was. I had actually, we would never have crossed paths because I didn't have a footprint online. I'm a fairly private guy, and I'm forced onto these podcasts at gunpoint. I'm a very private guy, and so I don't have my life out on Facebook. I'll have people like through the program. I'll get to know somebody through Evolve, one of the students, and the next thing I'll get a Facebook request, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And they go out there and they realize like there's nothing there.
Yeah, I'm like
Like
that
you
too.
don't even know how old I am based on my Facebook page. There's nothing there. But that's just me. And so Mitch would never have found me otherwise.
Mm.
Most people have never heard of me, but I'm a world-class professional portrait painter and illustrator. I mean, I did a cover for the Rolling Stones. Like,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be invisible, but here I am. Most people, they hear my name, they have no idea. They've never heard of me. But I've had multiple careers within the arts, and I've been at the top of each field as I've moved from place to
Which
place.
which is a wonderful lesson in these times that you don't have to be across everything all of the time in the digital world. You can still talk to people and operate in an analog way as long as it's driven with consistency and passion and love of the craft.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, for me, I like I prefer one-on-one conversations. I prefer this to talking to a group of people.
Hmm.
And it's like obviously in business you have to do both. I wear a lot of hats. I do conventions. I'm speaking with professionals. Again, just trying to make what we offer, the best that it can be.
Hmm.
And I'm always open to the idea that I don't have all the answers. I have some of them. I have some of the pieces to the puzzle, and I know the results that we get. But I don't believe like this. The Evolve is in its 18th iteration. That's a lot of changes over a very small window of time. Every time that I find a place where students get piled up in the program where they struggle to get past a particular exercise, I dig in and try to find a way to break that thing up into smaller parts. And the ideas always surface how to do it. And so 18 iterations in, not every idea is mine. Some ideas come from other people, and if I'm not open to other people's ideas and how they approach things, and I do a disservice to my students, right? The program for up until the last maybe 8 months, I was not the face of Evolve. We had a student of mine who was the face of Evolve because I didn't want the program to be built around some professional artist. I wanted it to be the program's built around the students. Like in my school, I have a brick and mortar school. We have 200 students a week come in, and I don't have a single piece of my artwork in the school. Nobody here knows what I do. Some of them look me up and now they can find some information on me, but most of my students have no idea what I do. They come in, I'm just some local guy with an art school. And they think that what we do in here, which is, again, we take high school kids and turn them into pros, they think that's normal. This is normal to them. And which is great. That's how it should be.
And that's a
You pay
test.
for an education, you should get one.
As a testament to what you're doing, and I love the lack of ego there too. Um, I'd love to drill into that first year of yours, because there's you mentioned there the small steps and breaking it down into tiny parts. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. There's such a lesson that constantly comes up when I work with my coaching clients, because invariably most of them are working with me because they've in some way become disconnected with their cause or their passion or where they truly want to be,
Right.
whether the day job has consumed them or whatever the reason. It always ends up in this busy world becoming a brief of take the first step and then come back and then come back. So I know that your first year, going from zero to becoming a professional, has a story that really exemplifies that. If you wouldn't mind sharing it.
Yeah. Well, so again, everybody is different. Personalities are different. I am a tenacious human being. I I set my sights on something and that's it. I'm a burn the ships kind of guy. I'm a plan A only personality. And even though it doesn't like I'm not a risk averse person. I'm not dumb. I don't just jump ship with no plan, but I formulate a plan quickly, kind of make sure I'm comfortable with the decision I'm making, and then I jump. I find that if you stand on the edge of a cliff too long, a jump into 20 feet into water becomes terrifying. Every minute you stand there, the jump feels 10 feet taller. And so make the decision quick that you're going to commit to this and jump. And if you do that, then you figure it out on the way down. And so when I was working construction, and one day I went into work, I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. I was 21 years old, and I just gave my tools away to one of the apprentices and went home. Stopped off at the school on the way to get an application to go to college there because I decided I was going to do book covers for a living. I didn't even know what the odds were. I didn't know what the success rate of somebody trying to get into book cover illustration was. It's very low. And you have a better chance of being a doctor, right? Because if you do the work and you go to medical school, you pass, you're a doctor. You do the work in art. If your vision's not what the population's interested in, you don't have a market. And so you could do the exact same amount of work as a doctor and not land, right? Or not have the social skills to find the market, because there's a market for everything. If you painted thimbles, there's a market for that. It might not be a big market, but there's a market for it. And so, from that standpoint, I would say that becoming a doctor is just a matter of doing the work. Becoming an artist is a lot more than that, right? To be a successful artist, from the standpoint of a professional, like professionally, to be successful in making art, that's pretty straightforward. That's not that hard. Because, again, if you're properly trained. I'm going to give you a landing page. In fact, I'll just give it to you now. So evolveartist.com/cc. I have a video there. It's a landing page for your audience where I actually break down in 7 minutes how a painting is constructed using nothing but fundamental learning. It's 4 steps to create a wholly believable 3-dimensional painting. 4 steps. Like you go to college or university for 4 years and they never touch the surface of these 4 things. They are always starting over that, as if you already know it, even though it's never been taught. They don't teach it anywhere. But this is a way for your viewers to get an idea of how simple construction of a piece of art is, because that's what it is. When you make a piece of art, the creativity is in the idea, what I'm going to paint, what the image is going to look like. Once you have that, it's technical application that constructs the painting. It's like an architect. They design a beautiful building. The creativity is in the design. Then the construction crew comes in with rivets and steel bars and concrete, and they construct it. Now, sometimes on site, they have to be a little creative in what they're doing, because they start to build something. It's like, this is not working. Something has to be moved. They pull a column out because it's not needed and it's obstructing space. And so in the painting process, creativity is in the design of what the final piece will look like. Once that's done, that hat comes off, and then you have to have the technical application to construct, not to paint, but to construct a painting. That's different. When you first start out, that construction is technical. Eventually, when you think that way, when the technical becomes how you think instead of a process, and it happens quickly enough, it frees you. It starts off very strict, but eventually, when you're no longer painting on opinion, but based on sound understanding, it gives you ultimate freedom. And it's like you think about in music, you have to, like if you're going to play a guitar, you have to learn how to do certain things technically first. Mm-hmm. Once you have that, then you can riff, right? And dance is the same. Well, visual arts are the same. There are technical things, and you have to lock them in. Once you have them, boxing, they're just a handful of punches, slip and roll. Once you have those, then it's a matter of what you do with your gifts. How creative are you with them? How quickly do you think on your feet when you're fighting? But making art is the same thing. And I have a brother. He writes code. He's a professor at a university, but he designs algorithms. Something you would think that couldn't be further away from the creation of art. And he's my older brother's a genius. He designs algorithms, and it's just incredible stuff. And I have conversations with him about it all the time. And one of the conversations we had, which I found very interesting, is I realized that the process that he uses to design an algorithm is exactly the same as the process I use to make a painting. So he starts out with a problem. His problem is whatever it is. He needs to figure out a way to make the calculations of arithmetic twice the speed that they currently are maxed out at. The equivalent of that on my end is, what do I want to paint? I want to paint something beautiful. So what is that? Or I have a book cover that I'm doing, and I have a scene. I have to organize how to make it look interesting. That's the same basic creative process. Once once he knows what it is he's trying to do and he's kind of creatively problem solved how to do it, he then has to write technical code. Me, I sit down and I technically paint. I'm using technical skill to paint. Along the way, as he's writing, code's not doing what it's supposed to do based on what he expected. So he creatively problem solves the writing of the code to get the result, the functioning algorithm. To me, I'm painting, that's not really doing what I expected it to do. I creatively problem solve the application to get the result I want. Computer science, writing code, and making paintings are the same thing when you're properly trained. And it's like I find that pretty much everything works that way. There's a creative aspect at the beginning, there's a technical application, and in the technical application, because things never go to plan, there has to be creative problem solving in the application along the way. And I find pretty much everything works that way. Surgery works that way. Doctor gets in, they start doing something, and something's not what they were expecting to see. Something goes wrong. They, on the site, they creatively problem solve the thing and put you back together.
And it's drawing upon the compound hours that are poured in the learning, isn't it? Which
yes.
Is that what happened in your own journey? Because obviously, with no education apart from the semester at university, is it safe to say that you simply put in the time consistently?
Yeah, well, one of the problems. So there's people say practice makes perfect, but practice does not make perfect. If you practice something that does not work, you are embedding a skill that doesn't work. Perfect practice makes perfect. And so if you have a good education, a good foundation, all of the experience you gain using that foundation makes you very powerful in that skill set. If you have an education that is flawed or is missing parts, what you're building becomes lopsided and it doesn't work. It works in some cases and not others. Like that's a great way to know that your education is there's a hole in your foundations. You sit down and you work, and sometimes you strike gold, and other times it's nothing but mud. And it's like, well, how could I be able to do this and this? And I don't know why, right? If you don't know exactly why something is working or not working, there's a hole, not in an advanced idea, but in a fundamental. The fundamentals are so straightforward and they're so obvious. They literally fit as a few like raindrops in the palm of your hand if you can see them for what they are. The problem is that most people never see them. They're hidden behind perspective and figure drawing and, the 8 elements of design or whatever these things are. They're peddled as education. It bothers me. It bothers me that art education is so poorly managed, because there's so much potential for beauty to be put into our world. If we could only open up that door to all the creative minds. Like I get, for me, I'm a traditional artist. I love digital art. Not doing it, you wouldn't catch me dead. But I love the fact that you have a bunch of people who have a 50th of the skill set that a traditional painter has, but can produce digital art at the same level. Because the digital tools, like I don't know how to make a gradient. Like as a painter, I can make a gradient, a fade, seamless. A digital artist couldn't do that traditionally, but there's a tool that does it for them. And so they don't have to develop that skill. That's the thing. If you can't do that, you can't make traditional art. That's a critical piece of the puzzle. And you have to know where they go. A digital artist has a brush that does that. They can create a texture, where a traditional guy has to be able to construct that. And so you can have a much, much smaller skill set to do digital art. Your vision can be brought to life with a very small number of skills. And there is just an absolute glut of incredibly beautiful art being created by artists who don't have much in the way of skills, because the tools do it for them. And that's not me knocking them. I love it. I have so much digital art, prints that I've bought from artists, because I think this stuff is absolutely gorgeous. And it's like, but for me, what if there was a real education in the world that everybody who was creative, that wanted to have that outlet, was given a voice? Well, how beautiful would the world be that we live in right now? I mean, up until about 20 years ago, within the illustration fields, if you couldn't do traditional art at a professional level, you had no access. Now you've got tons of people who couldn't do art at that level, but they can do it digitally, and they're all working. And every one of them has a different life experience, and they're bringing entirely new ideas into the world, and that inspires everyone else. And I think that if, again, if let's say 1% of the population of the world currently can make art or is confident enough to make art, but maybe 5% of the population, if given the abilities and kind of a boost, what would that look like? Like, what would that look like? And what would that inspire? Like, every place a new piece of art, a new idea springs up, visual, like a visual piece of art. How does that inspire all the other artists? Take that and move in another direction, something they never thought of before. It happens in all other fields in science. Somebody comes up with an idea, and all of a sudden it's like, right. So several years back, they teleported an atom 2 feet. All of a sudden, billions of dollars got dumped into that end of the field because now they knew it could be done. Well, what were the limitations? Nobody would touch it before because it didn't seem possible. But now they're teleporting stuff. Now it's not people and cats, but an atom, quite a distance. What's that going to be in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years? Only because somebody cracked the door open. And I think that's the same with visual, with imaging. Somebody out there has an idea that nobody's thought of before. And if they could only get access to the skills to voice that visual impulse, maybe an entire new corridor of creation opens up. But until somebody has the language with which to create that art, we don't get to enjoy it in the world, and it doesn't open up those new avenues. And so for me, like, I don't even have a problem with AI creating art. It's very clumsy right now, but at some point it's going to create things that are so absurd that it's going to spark new ideas in people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, and you know, I'm from a working class background here in the UK, and I saw so many artistically gifted friends, or at least people who were interested in making art, fall by the wayside. And you know, a lot of those people, they either went into, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking the path you took, going into construction, going into retail, whatever the job is. We all have to go out there and make money. But so many of those people showed me an interest in following the path that I did into commercial artwork, but just didn't believe it was possible, to your point there. You know, they didn't. And why would they? Because society still, after all these years, frowns upon art as hobbying or doodling or, you know, something to do in your own time. And I think you're right. I don't think education is serving it in the way that it needs to.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I don't mean to sound like I'm not trying to attack the people who are teaching. And, you know, generations ago, if you wanted to be an artist, and it was a celebrated field, Michelangelo and Da Vinci, and it was a celebrated field. Those were the rock stars and the actors of their time. The only way to develop those skills was to study with somebody who already had them. University strips that away. Most of the people that teach in universities, they're the failed artists, the people who can't make a living at it, so they need to make a living, so they teach. So what are they teaching? They're teaching the things that didn't work for them. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? That would be the equivalent of having a person who couldn't pass basic math tests teaching math at a college level, right? And so you think about that in the first generation, when that happens, you have a bunch of teachers who they can't make a living with the skills they have, and so they teach. They don't teach everything they know. They teach what they can within the window of time that they have with a student. That generation of students then needs to make a living. They have even less information than their teachers did. So what do? They can't make a living at art, so they become teachers. You go 3 generations out, it's like nothing of any value is being taught. But the students are coming in, and you know, most of us were raised on the idea, and I think the younger generation now is seeing it differently. They're starting to see it differently. For me, I was raised on the idea, if you go to college and you do what you're told to do, on the other side, there's the promise of a career. But the truth is, within the arts, that's not guaranteed at all. In fact, it's almost guaranteed that you won't have a career if you go down that path, especially in the fine arts. If you go into like graphic design, college is definitely the way to go. But if you want to learn how to paint and build a career as a painter, There are almost no schools to go where you're going to get the education you need. And it's just that, the people who are, if you're a professional, you're making too much money painting to take a job at a university. Some people want to give back and they'll jump in and they'll do that. But like if you get a really great teacher in a school, well, so you get them in your third year, but you've got 2 years of useless information rattling around in your head. What's this teacher going to do in a 6 month window with you? Going to change the trajectory of your life? That's highly unlikely. And after you're done with them for 6 months, you're off to another class with a different teacher, feeding you more stuff that doesn't work. And I mean, this is even in the best schools, right? Some of the best schools, they only hire professionals. But even that, it's deceiving. Like, what is a professional? Somebody who was commissioned to do one piece of art could argue they are a pro. They have been paid for their work. Well, like, what's the level of professional? If are they wildly successful? If they made a living at it for 10 years? Okay, well, that person might have something to offer. But even in that, just because you do it for a living doesn't mean you know how to teach it. Mm-hmm. Most professionals that teach, and I've found, and again, I'm not attacking anybody. Like a lot of these people, they're my friends. I did the same thing when I first opened my school. Like I thought I was teaching, and eventually, because it was my own space, I realized like people, they're looking at me like I'd say things, and they had no idea what I was talking about because I was talking over their heads. I was trying to teach them my experience. That doesn't work. You can only earn experience. You can't teach it, right? It can't be taught to you. You can learn how things work, but then you have to earn by working at the easel through your own experience to make sense of this stuff. But, a lot of these teachers, they come in and they don't remember what it was like to not know something. And they speak and it's like, well, can't you see this? And the student's like, no, I can't see that. Well, how can you not see that? It's right there. Well, you don't remember what it was like when you didn't know, when you didn't see, because you've known and you've been seeing and working at a professional level for 30 years. You lose touch with what it is to be lost and confused and have somebody say something and be like, no, I don't understand. And unfortunately, the schools, the universities can only hire the people willing to work. And if you're a professional artist, if you're like a serious pro, you're making way too much money making art to stop and then go work for a university where every Tuesday you've got to show up and deal with an array of students that some of them care and some of them don't. And, there's all these things. And it's like, why would you do that when you can be working in the comfort of your studio, making 20 or 30 or 50 times the hourly rate? Have a boss that's telling you, don't teach that instead. Like, why would you do that to yourself? And most people wouldn't. Artists will want to give back, but there's a limit. There's a limit to that. And so it's very, very hard for the universities to get good teachers. Even if they're conscientious about it, the pickings are slim. And so the universities are not going to shut down their painting class for this year. They have seats to fill, and so they'll take the best teachers they can get and hope that the teachers don't destroy their reputation and move the new class through. And hopefully at the end of 4 years, the students will have what they need to be pros. It's a really rough situation. Most of the professionals I know, even if they went to university, that's not where they learned the skills that they have to be a pro. They learned them by studying with another pro. That's where they picked it up. And the only reason that they're successful is because they decided that the skill set they had wasn't enough and went for further education afterwards. And it's a rough system, and nobody's really at fault. The system is just what it's evolved into. And it's and it's rough. Like I always have to be careful about how I sound because I'm frustrated about it. I'm frustrated about the fact that people can spend $300,000 and walk away clueless. Like for $300,000, 4 years of your life, you should be unstoppable. And like Evolve, we can, our program takes like 350 hours. It's 1 hour a day for a year. We can take it from being an amateur, never painted before, to being a pro, like a pro level deliverables. Now, we can't do the paintings for a student, but if you come in and you do the work and you're serious, absolutely nothing to hold you back. The training is there.
Is there a tipping point where, where a student in Evolve will start to see that evolution, will start to understand those fundamentals, and then can kind of springboard off into making the work of their style that is informed by their personality and their, eye on the world?
Yeah. So like with most things, like the fundamentals are boring. They're slow and they're boring. I say slow, but that's a relative term. If you want to be painting like really beautiful, fun things, you don't get to do that the first 3 months or 6 months, but you have to lay groundwork. But there's a point where everybody realizes, like, they'll step back and they'll be like, I know how to paint. I just painted something amazing that a year ago I didn't even believe was possible. And here I am. I know exactly how I did it. Like, it's not like it wasn't luck. I know exactly how I did what I just did. I could do it a dozen times over and over and over again and get the same result because I know how it was constructed. So it doesn't matter what I work on. I could do this. Now it's like, okay, well, what do I want to paint? And right. And so in the program, we have places where people are painting their own things. And so, but the idea is, like, what we're trying to do is give our students a fundamental skill set that applies to everything. And so our program looks like an oil painting program, but it's not. We just happen to use oil paint as the vehicle because it's versatile. We also look like a program that teaches realism, but we're not a realism program. Realism is necessary in order to be taught, right? And I can explain that. But we use realism, even though the skill set that we teach, it's only fundamentals, which means it could be used for abstract art also. We're just dealing in values, how dark or light something is, colors, and then the edges that connect them. That's abstract art as well. It's abstract, it's hyperrealism, it's realism, it's everything that's two-dimensional art. We don't teach a style. Now, the reason that we work with realism is that in order to be taught, there has to be an objective standard that you're shooting for. So if I put a red apple up on a table and you paint a purple cube and you say, well, you abstracted it, that's what you wanted it to look like. How am I as an instructor to have any idea what your intent was? It might be exactly what you intended. It could also be wildly off. I, as the instructor, have no way to know. So the only way to actually be taught how to make art is realism. Once you have those skills, you could step away from them without a problem. And so to kind of frame that, let's say you want to paint fully abstracted art, just shades of color, the edges that connect them, and create the impression of some distance in the painting, one thing over another. Nothing representative, just color shapes. If you don't know how to create an impression of distance, which is steeped in fundamental training, how do you put one thing on top of another? You don't have much of a language to do that. How do you know how colors interact? Well, that's a fundamental skill. And so if you can paint, right, if you paint an apple sitting on a table, you look at the apple, you get the image in your head, and then you paint from that image, right? It's not, your eyes aren't actually what's doing the work. And there's cognitive science in that, but your brain's constructing the image back in your visual cortex. It's telling you what you're seeing, but you're not actually seeing it with your eyes. Your eyes just take in color. Your brain breaks it up into shapes and constructs the image you think you see with your eyes. If you wanted to paint an abstract image, and I don't mean people who are just throwing paint at a canvas hoping to find something pretty. I mean somebody who can see an image in their head of an abstraction, and they want to bring it to life. You still have to mix the colors and match what you envision. That's a fundamental skill set. Painting in the shapes, in the scale, the shape, the direction, the size that you want is a fundamental skill set. If you want to have one thing look like it's in front of another, that's built in the fundamentals. So if whether you're painting an apple sitting on a table or an abstracted image that you see in your mind's eye, all the skills to bring that to life are steeped in the ability to mix the color you want and make the edges that you want and scale the image to the size you want and create the depth that you want or the volume that you want. That's all fundamental skills, and they're all trained in realism. Anything else, and you're kind of cheating yourself out of your potential. And it's fine if you want to create something beautiful that's fully abstracted. But if you want to command those skills, you have to be trained in realism and then get away from it, but have the ability to do it. And Picasso was classically trained. He had a great quote. I'm going to butcher it, but it's, if learn to paint like an art, learn to paint like a master so that you can create like an artist.
Yeah.
It's something to that effect. Master the fundamental skills so that you then have the freedom to create like an artist, how you want. And it's like the fundamental skills, they have to be trained. You can only learn them in realism, because the only way for your instructor to know if the red apple that you painted is correct is to have the red apple in front of them and look at it and say, oh, this red is a little bit too this. It's a little touch too dark. Your highlight's a little bit too yellow. The shape over here is a little bit, right? You have to be able to have somebody look at it and be able to look at the image and look at the painting and say, these are the things, these are the places where you're missing. Focus here in order to improve. When you can replicate what you see in the real world, you're now ready to create without any boundaries. That's really what the education looks like. That's how real education works. This paint what you feel. That's just, throwing darts in the dark, hoping to stick it somewhere. That's not an education. And it's fine if that's what you're looking to do, just to be creative. But if you want to be empowered as an artist, you have to have fundamental training, and that has to be done through realism.
Wow, it's quite the it's incredible stuff. Relatively big question to kind of wrap up on, but what's the vision now moving forward? It sounds like you're wholly committed to evolve as opposed to your own work. Do you, I believe that the power of art can play a major role in the challenges that we face in this world, as can broader creativity. Is that something you share a belief in? Do you want the students to go out into the world and put beautiful work out there to inspire people to knit communities?
Absolutely. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks back, and I was asked the question, like, what am I planning on doing in the future? Like, I'm almost done working, building out the education for Evolve. We're getting ready actually in January to launch a 2.0 version, massive upgrades to the program. And it's just all the things we've learned over the last 8 years. We've been upgrading the program all the time. Like every 6 months, there's an upgrade added to the current program. But we're rebooting the program in January, just with all the things that we've learned that the patches don't do a great job of addressing. And so I'm working on that format right now, and I'll be done by the summer with the entire program, because there's two portions to it. And so on the other side of that, I'm going to start painting again. I have an idea, something that I've wanted to do. And I artists have traditionally, not intentionally, but traditionally have documented the time that they've lived in. Go back and you look at, Napoleon, and you go into the Louvre and you see Napoleon. You can see his life played out on the walls there. And some of it is really over the top and it's grandiose, but but the thing is, any museum you walk through, it's a lesson in history, documented by the people who were living in it, not by somebody making a judgment call about it 200 years later. You can see how people were reacting to the things of the time by just walking through a museum. And I think, like, for me, I'm 50, I'll be 57 next month. I was around before microwave ovens were in people's homes. I remember when MTV was launched. I was in middle school. I remember the first computer, like the in-house computer. It was a 32K. A 32K, that's not even a thumbnail. And then I remember the 64K computers coming out and how powerful they were, right? I was there for that. I was around, and the world has changed so much in my lifetime. And I haven't done anything to document my time. I have the freedom on the other side of this to basically just paint for myself. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to document some of the people who I believe will go. There'll be written words, and there'll be videos of the things that they've done and they've said, and that have had such an incredible impact in the world we live in. I take a guy as an example, and I don't care about like political leanings or whether they're good or bad. Like, none of that matters to me. You take a guy like Elon Musk. I don't know that he would even sit for a painting. But this is somebody, he should have a painting in a museum at some point, so that 100 years from now or 200 years from now, people understood what he was doing when he was here. He did something when he was here. I I have a feeling his name is going to be very well known in the future, based on some of the things. Like, you do a little bit of reading and you look at the companies that he owns. Like, he's going to own Mars. He's going to own other planets because he's building all of the things that are needed to colonize planets. It's not just rockets. He has a tunneling company. Like, why would you need a tunnel? Like, you're building rockets and robots. Why tunneling? Well, because most of these planets are not inhabitable on the surfaces. He's building this over here and this over here and this, but they're all part of the same plan, I think, to be able to be the only person capable of delivering everything that's needed to colonize other planets. He has the vision for it, and he has the money to do it. And I think, like, so he's not a person that's going to be lost to history. I think Mars will be called Musk at some point, you know? But it's like, you get guys like, there's a lot of them. Like, even guys like Jordan Peterson's a good example. Jordan Peterson, he's a firebrand. There are people who despise him, and there are people that love him. He has an impact. Andrew Tate, vile or not, he is impacting young men, changing the dialogue. You could say the guy's a monster, but in our time, he is having a real impact on young men. President Obama here in the US, very, very powerful thing. The country, the United States, changed dramatically during his time in office. First black president. Like, and yes, there's a portrait of him. A guy like what's his name? The big podcaster, the bald guy. I forget his name.
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Yeah, Joe Rogan. Here's another guy. Very powerful guy. Again, yes, podcast. In 100 years, is anybody even going to know who he was or what he did when he was here or the influence that he had? Probably not. He will have a name. There'll be a Wikipedia page. You can watch videos, which, by then it'll be holograms. This stuff will look so old and dated. But to be able to go into a museum and see a portrait of him and have a placard that explains like what he was doing in real time in his life and how he was perceived by those who liked him and those who hated him, right? I think, like, for me, I would love to document some of these people who are influencing the world that we live in. And look, some of them are arguably detrimental, arguably detrimental, and others are really valuable. They're helping move things forward. I don't really care about what they do other than the fact that they are impacting, like, in a very powerful way, the world that we live in and the world that our children are going to grow up in. And again, you take somebody like Andrew Tate, like, you see him. There's a lot of stuff to really think poorly about this guy. But he's impacting a lot of young men. A lot of it's not a small number, potentially millions. And those young men are going to grow up and they're going to have their place in the future. And it's like, what do they take with them? And it all stems from him. He has a lot of influence. And whether you hate him or love him or indifferent, I think that he should be documented so that he's not lost. In 200 years, maybe something that he did matters, and he should be documented. And I think there's a lot of that. And I don't think it's done these days. Portrait paintings these days they're really reserved for politicians and the extremely wealthy. And even though most of these people I'm talking about are wealthy, they would not have portraits done. Those portraits, the idea for me is to do these portraits with the understanding that the people that I do them of would keep them, they would give them to their kids, and their kids would then donate them to a museum when they're done. So they could have them for 2 generations and then donate them to a museum so that they become part of a historical document. And I think for me, like, I'm not looking to make any money. I'm not trying to build a career, so I'm not doing them so that people will know who I am. I couldn't care less about that. I don't need to make money anymore. I'm fine. I'm doing it because I think, like, for me, it's a way of continuing that tradition of documenting the time that I live in, because I don't think it's really done very much anymore in the way that it was. Like George Washington, up until the Kardashians, he was the most recognized man in the world, because he was on the dollar bill, and that dollar bill is widely spread around the world. Everybody recognizes him. He died 35 years before the invention of the camera. Yet you could put a person from almost anywhere in the world in a room and somebody who's a little bit knowledgeable in a room with 100 men with white wigs, and they could pick him out.
Hmm.
And he died before before the first photograph was taken. That's the power of doing portraits, like historical portraits. I don't need to write the placard. History will do that for us. But I think that these people will be lost in the mix, especially because of social media. Everything is now just digital. And at some point, we move on. It's like all the photos in your phone. When was the last
Yeah.
time you went back 3 years in your phone to look at
Yeah.
photographs you took, right? And
Digital
it's like,
dust.
and so, yeah. And so I think like doing, for me, that's, and I don't know when I get there if I'll still want to do it, but it's an interesting endeavor. I love doing portraits. I love the idea of meeting these people, even the ones I don't think too much of, because I think, when we see them online, when we see all these things that we see, they're like cardboard cutouts of the reality.
Hmm.
All of these people, there's more to them. And I'm just curious, like getting to spend a little time and talking to somebody and then documenting them for historical reasons. I think I would really enjoy doing that. And like I said, I have my own views on these things, but like, I don't, doesn't really matter to me if it's a person I think is good or bad, or like, I have my opinions. I could be completely wrong as to whether or not somebody is good or bad. I'm not doing it for that reason.
It's like the camera of a photographer, isn't it? The neutrality of that art is actually really quite important because you are documenting a period of history, and it's as simple as that. I love that idea.
Yeah. And so for me, like, I love the idea of potentially meeting with these people, spending, for me, portraiture, because I did portraits for almost 20 years. The thing that I love most about it is the time meeting people that I would otherwise never have crossed paths with. I've met so many interesting people over the years. And they've enriched my life. Like just knowing them, getting to meet them, is you spend a couple of days with somebody, getting to know who they are so you can portray them well. And then being able to make that painting, which is a document of their time here. And it's been such a wonderful experience for me. I do miss it. And I want to do it. I don't want to do it for people who just have money. I want to do it for, for historical reason. And I want to leave those paintings behind. I'm not, like I said, I'm not looking to get paid for them. I just want to make the paintings and then leave them to history. So
Beautiful. I love that idea, and I hope it comes to pass.
yeah, I hope so too.
Brilliant. Well, this has been incredible, Kevin. This has been a real joy, and I appreciate your time. And where can people learn more about Evolve?
Yeah. So again, we set up a landing page for your audience. It's evolveartist.com/cc. There's a bunch of resources there. And actually, I didn't really talk about my students, but there's some student art there. All of the student art that we show, we tell them like museum grade work produced by high school kids. Everything that we show is young kids under the age of 18 for the most part. And the idea of that is just that, like, if somebody was 50 years old, it's just too easy for them to have studied. They could have a master's degree and they didn't really learn, and then they come into our program and we like help them. These are kids. They're not educated. They come to us a blank slate. And what we're able to do with them in a very short window of time is incredible. And so we show the young kids. But there's a video on that landing page. There's a bunch of resources, but the video on that landing page breaks down in just 7 minutes how a painting is constructed at the molecular level. Anybody could make sense of it if you watch it. The point of the video is that somebody could look at it and be like, I never thought of it that way, and maybe take that and be able to grow what they're doing. But also to show them, like, if you're struggling all the time, and there's a path, there's a program that offers a path. And if this video resonates with you, we're probably the place that you would want to learn. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then we're probably not the right fit. And the idea for us is we're not interested in students that we can't help. We believe that we can help anyone that's serious, but everyone's looking for something different. And if what we can offer, like that video is a good baseline, if that feels like the right fit, it'll feel like a comfy sweater. If you watch it and you're like, this all makes sense and it's delivered in a way that I feel like I could learn this way, then we're probably a good fit. And we have tons of other resources, but there's a lot there. You can go out and you can reach out to Evolve through that landing page. We have a bunch of stuff on YouTube. Again, tons and tons of videos for anybody who's interested in just getting a little bit more information. and people can just reach out to us if they have more questions.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Kevin. It's been a pleasure to talk, and yeah, get excited to see what's next.
Well, it was great being here. I appreciate you bringing me on.
A huge thank you to Kevin Murphy, founder of Evolve Artist, master illustrator and artist. What did you think of that one, guys? What do you think about talent not being real? It's obviously real, but you know, it's I get the point, and I think that the results of Kevin's program and his own story do go to show something of some kind of proof around sheer application, willingness to learn, bringing the heart. I say that in as much as, to learn to that degree, you have to want to learn. You have to be engaged and interested in the pursuit. But if you do, and you can apply yourself with that level of dedication that Kevin has shown, then isn't it encouraging to show that draftsmanship can be learned as a skill? And I do believe that. I have always believed that. I think that personality, story, and creativity are different things in the sense that they are kind of inherent to us. That is us as a personality that has to bring that to inform the direction of the work and the creative. But in terms of the practice, I always say that I could teach anyone to draw, and I believe that. I do believe that. I think the people, if there was a TV show and it was, I can't draw to save my life. I had this idea a while back, by the way. I hope we don't go and pinch it, but if there's any TV people listening, we should talk. That, a bricklayer, a doctor, a dentist, people who haven't historically drawn and don't believe they can draw, are paired together with a character, i.e. me, but someone with the mindset of Kevin Murphy, who can teach these skills and show them the difference between good and bad drawing and teach them how to draw in a way that's right for them, then I think there'd be something in that. I think I could prove that to anyone, and I really think that it's a physical act, isn't it? It's a physical skill, it's drawing. And I think that some people maybe are better predisposed to it, or are just more inclined to move towards it. I don't even think that is true in and of the skill itself. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that one. But great episode. I loved talking to Kevin. That was a pleasure. A very impassioned, focused character, which I love. I think over the years I've been kind of very floaty and sometimes whimsical and let myself get pulled in too many directions. But to see someone like Kevin, as he described there, a plan A only guy, in action was really interesting, and I love that. So I hope you loved it too. If you want to work with me one-to-one on the coaching programs that I offer through the Creative Condition, I would love to have a conversation. There is something for all budgets, and of course there's plenty for no budgets too. If you simply can't afford to invest anything in yourself, or you have no willingness at this time, there are 300 plus podcasts for free. You can access most of them at thecreativecondition.com, and if not, you can jump off onto the Spotify or whatever platform you choose to use for your podcast, where you'll find the entire archive. I love it. I love talking to all those people. There's also the reading list on there. There's lots of articles that I write for free, so there's plenty of ways to help develop your creativity if you have no budget. But if you do have a little and you're prepared to invest in yourself, let's have a conversation, because I love this coaching and I want to do it with more people, and I would like to do it with you. So give us a shout if you want to elevate your game, and we'll do that. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X. You can check out their global range of illustration and animation portfolios now at illustrationx.com. And please do consider supporting ui.org.ua, the Ukrainian Institute, supporting the Ukrainian creative community during a horrendous time of war. Well, that's it for me today. Got some great guests coming up soon. We've got the guys from All Flows in Milton Keynes. Looking forward to that. What else? We've got Facts Club Experiment coming up. That's a belter. What a book. Go and grab yourself a copy of the Facts Club Experiment. We've got the guys from that, or a number of the 32 coming up on the show. 4, to be precise. 4 people from the 32 who completed the project, which we will get into more later down the line. And as ever, plenty of creativity diaries of musings and ruminations on creativity. And let me know if you're not doing too well and you want to chat with someone who's been through the mixer with anxiety and the likes recently. Always up for a little natter. Drop me a message on LinkedIn or email ben@bentalon.com. Big part of the calls. Creativity is a guiding light in our lives. Anyway, that's enough from me. Have an awesome week. Stay creative. Love you all. Take care.